Welcome to Modus Cafe. Join us for fun, lighthearted, and educational conversations around training, athletic longevity, and the human side of climbing. With your hosts, Mercedes Pollmeyer and Katja Dove. Right. So, we're back with another episode with Mercedes and Katja. And today we're going to be talking about what do good training plans and good smoothies have in common. Kind of a funny analogy, but I think this is going to be really, really good. And before we even start talking about smoothies, we're going to be talking about what is training. I wanted to just talk about the definition of training first, because I really do think that people might have a misconception of what training is. And I'm curious, like, when I say training, what do you think about? You know, I want you to think about the exercises that come up. You know, what does it mean to you to be training? And so for me, what I think training is another word to use would be practice. And what's interesting, like in like regular sports like soccer or basketball, some countries use the word training as that session, and some other countries use practice. So to me, those two things are the same. But I don't know what it is about climbing and in the climbing industry, but somehow we use training and we only think about specific tools, such as the hangboard. And it could also be like campusing. I think people get these images of hanging off of your fingers, maybe with extra weight or something like that. Or like power endurance drills. I think that's another thing that people think about, like, oh, it must be really, really hard. And like my forearms are going to get pumped. So I think that in climbing, when we think about training, it's very, the vision is very small and very specific. But really what I think training is practice. It's this continuous intentionality to the movement of climbing. It could also be intentionality of your weaknesses, like you're going to focus on a specific part of your weakness in that session. It could also be working on strength training. And even when we talk about strength training, you might think, oh, it's the big lifts, but it's really anything that you're doing to create resistance in your body so that you can get stronger. So I really do think that in climbing, the definition of training really needs to change. And when people are thinking about getting started with training, it can feel really overwhelming and maybe even a little scary, because they think they're going to get injured because maybe they're not ready for the hangboard, campusing, things like that. And that's true. You might not actually be ready to do those things, but you are ready to train. You are ready to practice in the sport and put more intentionality into your sessions. So that's kind of something I want to change in the climbing industry. Maybe you all can help me with that, and think about training as a practice, and that this is open to anyone. And today we're actually going to go through what practice or what good training can look like, and what it really shouldn't look like. Okay. All right. So Katja, you're going to tell us all about really awesome smoothies.
Yeah, I really love the analogy of climbing training plans and smoothies. That's because I like analogies. If you've been listening, you know this by now, but I just briefly want to say something to your point. Mercedes actually just brought this up before we started recording. She was like, well, I don't know if when we talk about training and training plans, if everybody's on the same page. Like, some people have different ideas of what training even looks like. And we were reflecting together and thinking about this, how sometimes there's this perception of training has to be super hardcore. And I admitted to her that I used to think for myself that training is not for me, or working with a coach is not for me, because I didn't consider myself a real athlete. And one of the things we really like to change in the climbing community is that this idea of training, that training is only for certain people. And we really believe that training, or practice, like Mercedes likes to call it, depending on what you want to call it, really is for everybody who wants to put intention and consistency into their climbing to improve at different fronts, essentially, in their climbing. So that's really what training is for us. And for that, I want to dive into today's topic and kind of chat about what, in my opinion, good climbing training plans and smoothies or good smoothies have in common. And I love this idea because I feel like both climbing training and also smoothies, they're sort of, considered as something really good and healthy too. And I think both can be really wonderful, but if done well. And that's what I want to talk about. So, what are sort of the four things that I think good climbing training plans and smoothies have in common? The first one, I believe that good climbing training plans and good smoothies contain a lot of amazing components. So, they don't just contain one or two components, but they're full of amazing different components. And I will explain what that means for climbing training plans in a minute. The second aspect that good climbing training plans and good smoothies have in common is that the ingredients of each are perfectly dosed, so they support your health. So it's just the dosage also really matters of the components that go into climbing training plans and that go into smoothies. The third one is the combination of ingredients. Again, finding that balance of what goes well together in a smoothie. So let's say, if you add too much turmeric, maybe you just add avocados, milk, and turmeric, that is not gonna necessarily make a good smoothie. So the combination of ingredients are going to affect each other, and they're going to affect how a smoothie tastes. And similarly, depending on what you combine on a climbing training plan, that might work well or not, depending on what you combine. So the combination matters. So first we had a lot of amazing components. Then we had the dose of the ingredients matters. Then we had the combination of the ingredients. And the fourth point is it should be enjoyable. The smoothie that you're consuming, just like climbing training, it should be enjoyable. That's very important. Because otherwise, we're not going to use it, right? You can make the best smoothie, quote unquote, based on this recipe that you found. But if you're not enjoying your smoothie, just like if you're not enjoying the climbing training plan, you're less likely to continue to be consistent with that. Okay, those are the 4 different points. And I was going to just dive into those 4 points, talking about what does that mean for climbing training plans. Are you ready, Mercedes? Okay, the first one, again, is climbing training plans and good smoothies contain a lot of amazing ingredients. And so for our climbing training plans, that means general strength, specific strength, technique and skill drills, and also flexibility. And Mercedes, do you want to give us an example? How do we achieve that in our climbing training plans for our athletes? How do we combine these things?
Yeah, I think that first I want to talk about what most people, like what they don't do, is give enough attention to the skill aspect when it comes to the climbing. I think people do a really good job of climbing and climbing a lot. But if you're going to create this into something that's more structured and intentional, you want to focus on the skills. And so I think the skill component of a training plan is really like that. That is probably the main ingredient there. And then everything is kind of like everything else is maybe a little bit more of a supplement to make sure those skills get better. So, like general strength and specific strength, we do those so that the skills can get better. So, it's like these other little ingredients enhance the skills part. Now, if you kind of flip it, if you're going to be focusing too much on maybe general strength or specific strength, let's say, a bad training plan would maybe only focus on increasing finger strength for more than, like let's say a couple months. That's probably not going to be a good training plan because you haven't practiced the skill of climbing. So if you're going to add it to your climbing training, it doesn't need to be a lot. It's just a little bit, a small dose of it to get your fingers used to the position. Let's say you're working on a half crimp. Like I say a lot in a lot of our training plans, the hangboard is featured in the warm up. and is also featured as a no hang on rest days. Like I would say that for most part, that's where a lot of our hangboarding is positioned. And so we don't do too much of it. It's just enough to feel like you're getting something out of it. And we're not putting too much focus on that hangboard. Yeah, and then general strength and flexibility kind of go hand in hand. Again, these things enhance your skill development. And when you are training strength, you can also train flexibility. Strength and flexibility have a very close relationship. And so if you're training ranges of motion with some weight, you're going to increase your flexibility. And that's actually a really great way to save time as well. But you all, if you're a listener on this podcast, you know how much I love flexibility. We talk about it quite a bit. And it is something that I think is very underappreciated and a huge skill that people could actually just spend a little bit more time on. And we're putting it in our recipe because most people don't spend time working on their flexibility. So these are just some things, they all work really well together. If you're getting stronger, your skill set is going to improve. If you're able to move into positions more easily because you've trained your flexibility, your skill set is going to get better when you're climbing. And of course, you're working on technique every time when you're working your skill set. So yeah, a lot of our training plans have these components, and yeah, that you're checking all of the boxes as well.
Yeah, it's a little bit like taking a multivitamin. We like to work on all the things at the same time. Okay, yeah. So the second
Yeah, no, I think it's I wanted to say, like, I don't know if you're going to talk about vegetables, but I think it's really hard for some people. I know it's really hard for me to get consistent vegetables in my diet. Like I have to make sure that I'm eating my veggies, and I don't always enjoy vegetables, and I have to make sure that it's cooked in a way that I really, really love it so that I will eat a lot of it. And I think for some people, like the strength training component of training, that is almost like eating your vegetables. And if you put a vegetable in a smoothie, like the right kind of vegetable, you won't even taste it. It won't be so strong. And you're like, oh, I can't even taste this vegetable, but it's in there, and I think that strength training for a lot of people might feel that way. It's like, oh, I have to eat my vegetables. I don't really love doing this, but I got to get it done. But you can do it in a way that, is hopefully like enjoyable.
Yeah, totally. Actually, that is why I love the smoothie idea. So thank you for bringing that up. That's actually exactly why I started out with this idea. Is this idea of, oh, you have to eat your vegetables. Like, how can you eat the vegetables that you don't like and put them together? And that was actually going to be my third point. But I know the third and the fourth point kind of go together. This idea of how about we go from number 1 to number 3? That the combination of the ingredients in your smoothie and the combination of the ingredients or components of your training plan, that does matter. Like what you combine and how you combine it, right? And partially that depends on what kind of things do you like and what kind of things can you put into your smoothie and kind of put that one ingredient, that one vegetable that you don't like with other components that will make you now enjoy this one vegetable, or maybe it'll be less unpleasant for you to eat. And so actually having a good combination of components in your training plan really does matter. Like, for example, the sandwich idea would be you have circuits and you do one exercise that you enjoy, followed by one exercise you don't love as much, followed by another exercise. Or actually just like changing the exercise itself is really important. Let's say, for example, in your smoothie, let's say you are looking for a certain type of vegetable to add, like maybe you're adding a fruit because you want vitamin C, but you really hate grapefruit. Well, maybe you don't have to add grapefruit. Maybe you could add oranges instead. And our training plans are a little bit like this too, where we're going based on what is the need for an athlete. Let's say, does the athlete need a grip strength exercise, a core exercise, a hinge exercise? There's ways to substitute to still make this smoothie taste good for you, or still make this training plan work for you. Or how can we change how we put the training plan together so you're still enjoying doing this exercise and it doesn't feel too dreadful? This is why I said this earlier, because if we don't enjoy drinking smoothies, and even though they could be super healthy, whatever advertisement's going to tell you it's the healthiest smoothie in the world, if you don't enjoy drinking that smoothie, you're likely not going to drink it very often. And same with training plans. And actually, we use that so much, that philosophy of it has to be fun. This is, again, my fourth point, is that I just think life is too short. I think when people want to train for climbing, or they want to improve for climbing, or they just even want to use climbing as a way to stay or get fit, it doesn't have to be done in a way that people call eating your vegetables. It doesn't have to be suffering at all. Like, you can exercise and enjoy exercising and get fit and strong while doing that. And I actually think climbing is a great way to just exercise and keep your body fit as we age. And so, just like smoothies, I think, the training plans should be fun. And if they're not fun, there's different recipes out there, different components, you could swap out, or different combinations that will make the training plan much more enjoyable. I like to say that we like to bring life to our years instead of years to our life. I feel like sometimes people just exercise so they can live longer, but now they're not enjoying those years that they're spending to live longer. And so there's really a way to bring that joy into the now while we're exercising. And yeah, I think that's really important. And it's what keeps people doing what they want to do. And, one of the ways that we actually do this at Modus Athletica is actually we have this training membership. And not only do we use these principles for all the training plans that we provide, but we also have the community aspect. And the community aspect can provide this, it's like putting the cinnamon on top of your smoothie, if you like cinnamon, or just putting that little bit of honey on top of or into your smoothie. It's just what makes training so much more pleasant when you can share it with other people. If that is what you choose, we have a lot of members who don't engage with the community because they just want to come. They want to be anonymous. They want to just get the training plans and train, and maybe they're still part of the community in a passive way. They still get all the resources, but obviously, if people are feeling shy or just don't like to engage in a community with people they don't know, they don't have to do that either. Okay, so we talked about the components, which was number one. We talked about having a good combination of the components. And Mercedes said this with not eating her vegetables. To me, too, it's also for climbing training. Most people, for example, don't like to train slopers. People don't like to train their weaknesses. But this is what makes a smoothie beautiful, and this is what makes a training plan beautiful, is you should be training your weaknesses in a way that you might not even be noticing. You should be eating your vegetables in the smoothie so you're not even noticing you're eating that vegetable. And that's what good training plans are like. Training plans make you work your weaknesses, and by default, most people don't enjoy doing that, but the training plan should really help with that. And also, I want to say, with good combination, some exercises just go better together to help you progress. So it's not just a matter of them being fun or not, but just combining certain exercises in just the right way. And I think that's what's really important about, training plans, is really important so the exercises are actually beneficial. And let me give you sort of like maybe a bad example. Let's say one bad example would be to do endurance, especially power endurance, before doing a power workout. Anything that fatigues you is not a good idea to do before you do a power workout. The power workout should always be done before. And there's lots of other little combinations of like questioning what maybe should be done first and what could be done second, depending on your fatigue level and also depending on your goals. And that is actually one of the things I also want to mention, is that just like smoothies, of course, training plans differ between individuals. There's not going to be this one perfect smoothie that's going to work for Mercedes and I, because we also have different flavors. And that is okay. I think that is actually something really important, I think, for people to realize with training plans, is that it is okay to be different. It is okay to have different needs on a training plan. It's not like you're not a failure just because you can't keep this one training plan, or maybe this one training plan is not working for you. That just means it's not working for you, but it doesn't mean that training isn't working for you. It just means this one training plan is not working for you, and probably because, it wasn't individualized enough. And that is also something that we recognize in our membership. So Mercedes just, we've been making some, changes to our membership, and she just wrote this beautiful guide, which I think is a book. And I'm like, oh, you should publish this as a book. But it's a really beautiful guide on how to train, all the principles of training, and how you can use our training plans and then individualize them to your needs. And so I think it's really beautiful. And it really follows our motto, educate, don't dictate. We don't like to just say, do this, do that. We like to make suggestions. Of course, we provide training plans, but then we like to educate people and help them make the best out of the training plan for them. And you've probably noticed this too. Every time you find a recipe online, whether or not it's a smoothie or any other recipe, you're going to have to modify this recipe at some point for yourself, for it to be really good. Okay, and the last thing, which was my point number 2, but the last point I wanted to make, what makes a good smoothie good in terms of healthy is just the dose of the ingredients too, right? We want to make sure, I call this, jokingly, it's like a multivitamin, but we want to make sure that we dose different ingredients to support your health. And again, that goes partially into individualization too, but it also meaning that some people need some things more than others. Some people need more slower practice, some people need more crimp practice, some people do need maybe stronger fingers, whereas others might actually need to work on their skills a lot more. Turns out some people will have very strong fingers. That might be because their technique is not that great. Maybe that's why they have strong fingers, because they rely on their finger strength too much. And so what they might want to work on is technique, whereas other people, they might have really good technique and they could use stronger fingers or a stronger core or endurance, lots of things to talk about. But the perfect dose really matters, and meaning the perfect dose really for yourself, using not too much and not too little. And certainly not just throwing spaghetti in the wall, right? When we make a smoothie, we don't just want to open our cupboard and be like, okay, let's just add all the things. Like sometimes when people have not trained for climbing, they go online, there's all these ideas of what to do. And now they just start adding everything to their training plan. And that's not a training plan. Just adding everything to something doesn't make it a plan. It makes it, I don't know, like a garbage sale, probably. A garage sale. That's what I want to say, not garbage sale. Like a garage sale. But it's really important to know how much to add of what to a good training plan. Not only for it to be fun and for a smoothie to taste good, but also for it to be effective. There's obviously 2 things that we see a lot when training doesn't work well. Is actually, I would say 3 things maybe. It's either people don't do enough. This does not happen very often. I would say most people either don't start training. Those are the people that don't do enough, or the people who are intimidated to start training, or they feel overwhelmed, or they don't know where to start. If you don't train, that's not going to be helpful. And if you train too little, if you're not putting just the right attention in, that's not maybe going to help you. But most people who do start training on their own actually do too much. They probably do too much because they think now they need to add all these things. And not only is it really fatiguing to their body, it's probably also not going to be the right combination. And it's then probably not even giving them the results they're looking for. So what's the lesson learned? Well, the lesson learned is anybody could make a smoothie, just like anybody could make a training plan. I used to also write my own training plans. I don't think there's anything wrong with it. I think even just experimenting with smoothies, you can probably come up with good recipes. But I also think there's something said to actually learn how to make a good smoothie, like maybe using a good recipe. And that is often based on lots of experience, skill, and also lots of knowledge. So I think this is really where people who just have more experience can be really helpful in helping you at least save time instead of trying out a bunch of smoothies and see whether or not your stomach gets upset and you tolerate that smoothie and it's actually making you feel better. It can be really time saving to just, ask someone for help who knows a little bit about, making training plans or making smoothies. Okay.
Yes.
Anything else you want to
add? Well, yeah, if you want to learn more about making training plans, guess what? We have a 2-day event coming up that we are going to invite you all to, so you can learn about how to make the best training plan for you. So Katja and I are really, really excited about this. A couple times a year we put on these events, and it's been a little while since we've done something, but we're finally coming together and doing this again. And really like the feedback that we see and that we hear from new trainees, people who are really excited about climbing and they want to get better, and maybe they're not making the progress they want to see. But when it comes time to training, it's very overwhelming because there's so much information. And it's probably true for smoothies too. Like if you're trying to make a smoothie, there's at least 1,000 recipes that you could choose from. But what we're trying to do is give you a very uh, usable, like usable content that you can then scale to your own needs. And we're trying to get kind of like overcome that overwhelm that you might feel with training, because it is actually very simple. We can get very complicated in the details of climbing training, but when we think about practice or we think about training, it is very simple. And we want to kind of give that to you all. So yeah. And here's the thing though, like I think the number one advice that I see online for people who are wanting to start training is you should just climb more. What does that even mean? You know, what does climb more even mean? And that's where I think this word practice, like even just adopting the word practice when you go to the climbing gym next time, you might see a slight shift in how you approach your session. So yeah, let's give you more advice than just climb more.
Can I say something real quick?
Yes.
To use the smoothie analogy, I feel like when people say just climb more, it's like saying just add more stuff to your smoothie. The smoothie just gets bigger and bigger. And I mean, at some point, you can't drink that smoothie anymore. It's going to make your stomach really upset. Like you're going to get sick from that smoothie if you just keep adding things. So
Yeah.
feeling just climbing more is I'm not saying it will never work, I can, but it's just such a vague recommendation. And just climbing more in, like, let's say if you just added a bunch of bad ingredients in your smoothie, by adding more of the bad ingredients, you're not going to make it better. And not to say that climbing is bad. There is something said about, really learning how to use your body. But if the intentionality is missing, or if you maybe not know how to climb more and also a safe way, then it's just really hard. It's just a very general piece of advice.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, we're very excited about this event. It's going to be a 2-day event. We're spreading out over 2 days to not be so overwhelming. We actually had to cut down the things we want to talk about because we could do like a year-long event, one, day at a time. But we're going to condense it, just like a training plans. We're going to condense it into 2 days to really cover the most important parts that we think are really good for people to know to get started. And that training, it's a free event. And you can join us live. It'll be also recorded, so you can get the recording afterwards. And there's a few basic questions that we essentially want to cover that we've seen come up for people. And actually, these are a lot of the things that have come up for our members before they join the membership. Something that has, kept them from getting started training, and what the membership has really helped them. And we want to teach you a little bit about that. And the first one is really, the question, like, where do I get started training for climbing? So we're going to give you some tips, like how you can get started if you're new to training for climbing, but you've been climbing for a little bit. Of course, we're going to talk about, what a training plan should include. I mean, based on our opinion, obviously, there's different opinions out there. Different things work for different people too, but this has worked for us. So if our philosophy generally works for you, then our training plans might work for you as well. Another big question that we really want to cover that's very important to us is the question of, is training for climbing even for me? That was a big question for me, and I think that comes up for others, is this idea of identity. Like, oh, I'm not a badass enough climber, or I'm too old. Actually, that's something we want to cover too. I'm too old, I'm too busy, I'm not good enough at climbing yet. Sometimes people think they need to be somewhere. I don't know, they need to be at a certain level to start training. And that's not necessarily true. It's definitely good to have experience climbing before you start training, so you can, you kind of know the ropes of the gym a little bit. But even if you've never trained before, you're gonna have to start somewhere at some point. And if your worry is that you are too old to train, then I have news for you. You're not going to get younger. So if you think you're too old today, you might be even older if you start next week. So maybe starting today would be the day to do it. We also want to talk about how to train with little time. That's something we definitely understand, that most people, don't have a ton of time at hand. But that is also a big misconception. which is that you need a lot of time to train. In fact, one of the reasons that Mercedes and I believe some training plans don't work so well for some people is that they actually overtrain. And so we very much believe that sometimes with less time, you can do a lot more. And that's very much, our philosophy, because the question we're also asking is there such a thing as minimal dose? Yeah, we need to do the minimum amount, but it's probably going to be a lot less than you might think. And we're all about keeping people as healthy as possible for as long as possible. So being able to train and maintain that training lifestyle with your actual lifestyle is really important to us. So we really like to try to integrate training into that and not make sessions too long. And the last thing we want to cover, not the last thing, but like the last bigger topic is, what do we need to pay attention to for older climbers? When I say older climbers, I mean 30 plus years, like whether or not you consider yourself old or not. It's just that, if you're not a kiddo anymore, climbing training does change a little bit and our approach changes. But both Mercedes and I very much believe that we can get strong and be strong for a very long time in our lives, and we really like to bring that to our athletes as well. Yeah, that's what it's going to be. Or then should we tell people when it's going to be and how they can sign up?
Yes. Well, you can definitely reference the link below. Yeah, that's the best way to sign up. There'll be more information on what these webinars will include. Yeah, and we'll keep you posted on specific dates.
Yeah. Right now we're thinking, I think it's probably going to be September 24th and 25th. It's a Tuesday and a Wednesday, and you can find more information in the link below. It's going to be just after work, depending on where you are. You might be able to join live, or you can definitely watch the recording. Awesome. Yeah, thank you for listening, everybody. And maybe we'll see you at the free, event that we're doing. That would be really fun. We really love helping people get started on training for climbing. Or, if you've started, we love helping people make it a better experience and a more productive experience.
Absolutely. Amazing.
Okay.
We'll see you then, folks. Bye.
Bye.